Damselfly nymphs propel themselves using a unique, often difficult to match, snake-like motion. Successful damsel nymph patterns need to be thin, approximate the modeled color of the naturals, and have built-in mobility. Due to the namesake use of grizzly marabou, my Grizzly Damsel possesses all of these features to suggest the natural nymphs. Here's what you'll need to tie the Grizzly Damsel. So let's tie the Grizzly Damsel, one of my favorite impressionistic damsels. So I've got a 3 extra long curved nymph hook here, straight eye. I've slid on a 7/64 copper bead, narrow end towards the hook eye. This is a number 10. 10s and 12s are what I tie this in most often. So we're going to attach some olive 80 MFC Tenafly Company thread. Nip off the excess. Carry that down into the bend, roughly about halfway between the point and my flattened barb here. And then we're going to spiral wrap that thread forward about the 2/3, 3/4 point. So we're going to tie this fly entirely out of a grizzly marabou plume. So the first thing we're going to do is tie in a tail using the tip section of the feather. So I'm just going to stroke these fibers together, gather them. I want to tie in a nice sparse tail. I can moisten my fingers or dip them in a glass of water to control them. And I want that tail to stick out about half the hook shank. Transfer that measurement point to my left thumb and forefinger, trim off the remainder of the feather, tie that in, bead slid back a bit, no big deal, and just secure that along shank. We want to keep this nice and skinny. Damsels are skinny, have sparse 3-paddled tails that are part of their gill system. If you want, you could throw a wrap underneath the tail to help cock it up, and then we're going to open wraps right back up to the tie-in point and tie in our ribbing material, which is, to complement the bead, small copper wire, the UTC. I'm going to secure that along the side of the shank, all the way back to the base of the tail. Hold it there. And then we're going to put a little shell back on here, pearlescent, or I really love the Mirage Opal. This is medium. Gives the fly a nice little, we're just trying to make this fly catch a little bit of sunlight or available light as it goes through the water, draw a fish over to take a munch. So I'm just going to take a piece of this mylar, tie it in flat on top of the hook, and secure that thread forward to hold it in place. Now, what's left of the feather are two things. The after shaft, or in some circles plume, but the secondary feather, we're going to use that to form the thorax, so we'll come back to that later. The balance of the fly, the body if you will, what's left to do is we're going to dub the plumes on here. So I'm just going to strip a little bit away to get at them. I want to get to this meaty section. I'm just going to take my scissors, trim a section out, and then we're going to pull down the tying thread, moisten my fingers, and just take those little fibers and dub a very slender body. This is about as easy to dub as a rabbit. For marabou and rabbit are perhaps the two easiest, softest, dubbing friendly materials there are to spin and twist on the thread. So we're just going to spin that up. And the beauty of using the same material throughout the fly is you don't have any color match or issues where one different material is a contrary color and doesn't perhaps complement the look you're going for. So we're just going to dub this up, right up along the way. And we're going to pull our shellback material. It's going to get all twisted around the ribbing. We'll pull that over the top. Lay that down, a couple of wraps. I'm going to look at it. If you sort of hold and wiggle like this, kind of self-centers the material right on top. A couple extra wraps now that we're happy. I'm going to fold it back on itself, a couple wraps to lock it in place, trim off the excess. And then we're just going to take our ribbing material and just wind it forward open spiral wraps. I'm not going for anatomical correctness. I'm just kind of getting into a rhythm, segmenting the fly and adding a little reinforcement. Come up, tie off the wire, couple wraps in front, twist and break off the excess, and we've got the back half of our Grizzly Damsel done. A little straggler there. And now we'll tie in our our wing case material, and that is olive scudback. So I've got a short length here, we don't need much. I'm just going to lay it flat on top, come over the top on a short length of tying thread. Once around, twice around, and then apply tension, hold it flat on top, and secure it back onto the body slightly. I always overdub my bodies, that way I don't have to worry about the thorax and the body starting in exactly the same place with my thread wraps. I can have a little bit of latitude to position things. So I've done that there, got that on top. And before I form the thorax, I'm actually going to tie in the hackle, which is a partridge feather. I'm going to use sort of a brown phase looking one to complement sort of the darker look. You're welcome to use a gray phase for a little contrast. Okay, and I've stripped away the flue, got into the meat of the feather, and I'm going to tie that with the most prominently marked or convex side of the feather on top of the shank, so that convex side or most prominently marked faces the front. It'll sweep back naturally. I get a good firm tie-in. Secure that back to about the midpoint between the bead and the wing case you secured in. And now we're going to form the thorax. And the thorax, as I said earlier, is going to be formed by this little secondary feather, the aftershaft feather, which is common on these grizzly marabou plumes that come off a chicken. Or pheasant rump is another excellent source. You can get sometimes some off partridge feathers, but probably your two best sources are grizzly marabou and pheasant rump. And I like the grizzly marabou a lot because it's a lighter feather, so you get some lighter dye jobs to it. So to prepare this, I can pinch out the tip and then remove that little stem where it was attached to the hide of the bird, and then I've got this prepared. And you can see that's all relatively the same length all the way along. Now if you tried to tie this in, it would probably break on you. It's very brittle, so we're going to use a dubbing loop to control and wind this forward to form the thorax. This is going to be looks kind of bushy when it's finished, but once it gets wet, this is mobile, full of motion, very suggestive of the natural swimming motion of a damsel nymph. So we'll put that aside for a second and prepare and form a dubbing loop. So we're now going to dub the aftershaft feather. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we're going to do is use a little bit of this Loon Outdoors Swax, and we're just going to apply a thin coating. I'm not going to gob it on there, but I want at least a length of thread equal to the length of the aftershaft feather. We're going to come up, take our aftershaft feather, I'm holding it by one side, and I'm going to lay that onto our tacky thread. This is simply just to hold it into position. I'm now going to take my dubbing tool and I'm just going to pull down, and I'm going to form a dubbing loop by putting the end of the tool into the thread, bring the thread back up, wind it around, and now I've got that thread loop formed, which is going to trap our aftershaft fiber. And I'm going to wrap that right back to the base of the wing and then come forward with my tying thread right up to the rear of the bead. And all I'm going to simply do now is spin my dubbing twister tight, slowly to start, progressively faster, and when those fibers radiate out 90 degrees like they are now, you can brush them with your fingers to make sure that nothing falls out. All we've got to do is wind this forward. So there you go. The dubbing loop has been used to control a brittle material and add durability to it. So now we're just going to start winding this around. One wrap right in front of the other. And I find for these grizzly damsels, one single plume that comes at the base of just about every grizzly marabou feather is more than sufficient. So we're just going to wrap that in, pack it in nice and tight, because again, this is just like marabou, so once it gets wet, it's just going to slim down to nothing. Bring this up, weave the tying thread through. I'm trying to go behind the partridge feather and in front of the thorax to tie this off. Going to slide my scissor points in there. Be careful of what's in there. You don't want to accidentally trim out the partridge feather. And we can come in a little bit and moisten our fingers just to train these fibers. We want to sort of part the hair, if you will, on top of the fly to create a path for our wing case, and then stroke this back out of the way just so it makes it easier to wrap our partridge feather. So I'm going to take the partridge feather, I'm going to take a half turn with my left thumb and forefinger to position the feather, make sure that that convex side of the feather is facing forward, the most prominently marked side. I'm going to come in with a pair of hackle pliers, English style. Get a good purchase on that tip section. And I'm going to wrap this partridge feather around once. 1.5 times is all you get, which is perfect. It's just a little more action to the fly. This fly is all about movement. Basically a variation of my aftershaft damsel I featured in my first book, Fly Patterns for Still Waters. So I've tied off the partridge. Now all I'm going to do is use my fingers to divide the partridge into 2 equal clumps. I've basically created a path. So I'm just going to sweep everything down and back. Build up a little bit of thread in behind there to sweep everything back. I'm going to pull my wing case material forward and just moisten your fingers just to clear a path and try not to trap too many fibers down. Don't take any movement away. A couple of wraps on top, and then I'm going to take the waste material sticking out over the eye, fold it back over and hold everything in place. Just with some tying thread, secure everything off. You could change your tying thread, put a hot spot in there. You could dub a little bit to cover those thread wraps up. Early on in my tying career, I used to do that. Now I don't think it matters at all, so I don't. Apply a little bit of super glue, brushable super glue, to my tying thread. Wind that in place. Whip finish, and the tying portion of your grizzly damsel is complete. All that's left is to trim that wing case. So to do that, you could notch it, but over the years, I figure if a fish can see a notched wing case, there's far other greater flaws to notice, such as that little tiny broken end of the partridge there that I've trimmed out. So I'm just going to come in and trim straight across. Don't pull too tightly, just control and make a cut. And there's your wing case done. You can pinch, get everything to flow back, and there you have a nice, demure grizzly damsel. This fly has got lots of built-in movement from the grizzly marabou. That aftershaft thorax is going to pulse and move. The jig action that's created by the bead. It's a great little fly. The finished grizzly damsel. Add a few to the damsel section of your Stillwater fly box. For more information on fly fishing, and Stillwater fly fishing in particular, please visit my website at flycraftangling.com. Here you will find fishing tips, fly patterns, articles, information regarding my seminars and schools, along with links to my blog and mine and Brian Chan's online Stillwater fly fishing shop. You can also visit our store directly at stillwaterflyfishingstore.com. In addition, you can also follow me through my social media channels, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching, and please take the time to watch my other tying videos as well.